I feel like we just watched a dream.
Yeah. What did you think, Gabe?
I thought it was, I mean, a dream is a good way to put it. It was like a painting.
Yeah.
It was stunning to watch.
Yeah.
It was ethereal. That's right. I mentioned that I suspect that there was some dubbing happening with the actors just saying the same lines that they said during the shot in post.
That's common in most movies.
Yes, but it usually happens when the character's back is turned and they need to add a few extra lines of dialogue.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think it's pretty common.
Okay, fair enough. It stood out to me here, but maybe that's just because I noticed it for the first time. That's very possible.
Well, perhaps it's a mistake on the part of the filmmakers that you noticed.
No, I actually, but I don't. It didn't take me out of the experience.
Fine.
I added to the etherealness. I suppose that's why I'm pointing it out.
Okay.
What did I think? I think where have I been for the last decade? That was quite a film, and I can't believe I hadn't watched it before.
Yeah.
What prompted it? That's why I'm asking. I asked that immediately afterwards. Like, why did this guy make this film? That's incredible. I have a lot of questions, and I have a lot of things that I want to talk about.
I'll say one comment that struck me on the film was just how linear it is. One thing happens after another, one shot after another, each shot follows from the last. There's no random jumps around time other than his visions. There's no time is linear, completely linear in the film. And honestly, that's quite a rare thing to see in film.
Also, very satisfying as they are driving in a straight line.
Yeah.
For most of the film.
Yeah.
Why has she only got one arm?
We don't know.
But what does that mean? So there's a lot of symbols in the movie. What does it mean that the heroine only has one arm?
She's broken. She's living with permanent scarring she's got from the struggles of the wasteland.
Fair enough.
And that motivates her decisions in some way.
I was very interested to see the interaction between Max and Furiosa and the brides when it's not clear how they're going to end up cooperating. Like, you're watching it and you're like,
Yes.
this would be nice. That obviously, I want these guys to... I like these guys are cool.
Yes.
I'd like them to cooperate. They've looked at each other maybe once.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, there's something there. Like, that's a badass duo.
But they go in steps.
Exactly. But
Each step
those were incredibly satisfying.
They were.
But they weren't exactly obvious. So that was... And there wasn't... For a while, I thought Max was mute. Because he doesn't speak for the first half of the movie. So that was also fascinating to see them interact without language.
Yes.
And understand each other, I think, most of the way through threats and violence and acts in kind and then bravery.
So most TV shows or films, they write scripts that involve words. But here it feels like the script involved the actual grunts and looks and very small body language indicators that the characters used.
And maybe that's I can see the script sort of laying that all out and saying, this is how it needs to go. This is what needs to be communicated, and the way you're communicating is grunts.
It's something you can work with. It's just most people choose not to because it's way harder to write.
Yeah, I see. I was trying to remember what the most satisfying moment of cooperation between Max and Furiosa was, for example.
I'd say the key moment is when he hands her a loaded gun.
Yes, which moment is that? What's
That's
the first time?
That's when the motorcyclists are bombing them.
Yes. And she goes up the top? She out the skylight?
He's loaded it, he's handed it to her.
Yeah.
When she jumps back into the war rig.
Where was she?
She comes out, she's offering the deal.
Yeah.
Sees the war party.
Of course.
Yells fool. And then she jumps in and he hands her a gun.
Yes.
So that's the first moment.
Yeah, and but as you're saying, Gia, it's very satisfying to see that sort of build-up of cooperation bit by bit. They start to slowly trust each other. They're like, okay, it looks like it's better if we work together. and then some of their movements are just so smooth, like they're one single thing, and they're like moving the gun around or pieces of the truck or stuff like that.
On the surface level, the film is about patriarchy being evil,
Right.
and it needs to be destroyed, and
Yeah.
a redistributionist new political faction needs to take over. But on a symbolic level, it's not that. It's a melange of many different pieces being swirled together in interesting ways.
Right.
So Max, Furiosa abandons the evil old patriarch, but she marries Max.
Yeah.
Her interactions are spiritually that of marrying him.
Right.
So first they fight, they find a way to trust each other,
Yeah.
and then they begin to synchronize,
Yes.
not just in words, but
Yes.
in their actions. They, as you said, they become a single component.
Yeah.
And eventually, he gives her his blood, and importantly, from a spiritual marriage point of view, he gives her his name
Yeah.
at the end, which is it's the final stamp, the final thing,
Yeah.
or you could say, in marriage, it's the most important thing that a man can give is his name.
On that, let's explore that a bit more. So the start of the movie, you have the tyrannical husband that hoards the mother's milk,
He's a
and
dragon. He's
yes,
smell.
and he controls the flow of sustenance to his people. He can shut it off. It doesn't flow from the mothers. It doesn't flow from the mother. It flows from the tyrannical patriarch. Furiosa saves the brides, escapes with them, and along the way, in a sense, and this I think is shown by the fact that Max leaves at the end of the movie, she encounters the positive aspect of masculinity.
Yeah.
And it's like a spirit. It arrives out of nowhere on a cross, interestingly, on a cross,
In the desert.
in a slave's collar,
Oh yeah.
threatens her,
Yep.
beats her,
Oh yeah.
helps her. Or it doesn't. I mean, beats her in a fight. I specify. He's not physically violent to them, but he defeats her.
Yeah.
But does it for survival reasons, not for oppressive reasons.
Right.
So he's a spirit. He's wandering. He's a ghost. Yeah. At the end of the movie, the wives return to the home. The bride return to their home, and the mothers who were providing the sustenance open the floodwaters instead of the patriarchal figure.
So in a there's a symbol there which is not that it's patriarchy precisely, it's tyranny that's choking off the flow of the needed things. And it is and by the way, when they go and they find the mothers out in the desert, they're infertile, they're old, they have no children, the green place is gone. The women only, and it's very explicitly women only, because we can't trust men; they're all women. And they, what is it? She refers to her initiate mother. So it's clearly a woman-only system that collapsed. And so at the end, what you have is this almost a spiritual combination of positive masculine and positive feminine that has escaped from the tyrannical masculine.
Yes, and it's interesting because so on one end they are pursued by the all-male war bands, the three war bands, three tyrants at the head of each. One is gasoline, one is bullets, and one is control. One is
No, food.
well, one is food, sure.
Food and water, but
Food and water.
yes, I think
Sure.
Control.
I it's a point. And on the other side, they're framed by those two. One side, the all masculine war bands, and by the other, the all female grown mothers.
Yeah.
And so, but interestingly, along the way, so they meet the spirit of positive masculinity, you could say, but also the male skinhead meets the war boy. He meets the positive spirit of femininity.
That's true.
He's redeemed by her, and he says, "What is it? The gates of Valhalla have opened 3 times for me,
Yeah.
and every time I've heard the voices, and I've been unable to grasp it." And he is given empathy and love in a very real, tender way,
Yeah.
and given a new life.
Also, Max himself he's not really positively masculine at the start. He's in pure survival mode. He's more like an animal. He grunts. And it's through the forced need to protect women that he himself is changed into something more human.
I've mentioned this before to you. Have you ever read Gilgamesh?
Yeah.
So I was very, very struck by Enkidu's bringing to civilization. The gods create Gilgamesh as the tyrant king. They create his twin in all force and personality. But he's a wild man. He's among the savages. He runs with the deer. He drinks from the streams. And they send a priestess of the goddess of sexuality. It's not love, it's sex.
Right.
And she seduces him and brings him to civilization. The reason I bring this up is Max is a wild animal who is brought to humanity. He actually learns to speak by this encounter with women.
So that's the component that I think everyone resonates. There's something that resonates underneath it, which is why we're animated. We watch something that matters. Symbols matter. Symbols matter more than many other things. So we watch it, we feel we've seen something important, and it's the relationship between Max and Furiosa, where they both become more than the whole becomes more than the sum of the parts, and achieves more than either could alone. However, it falls a little flat for me, and this is, I think, bound up with the Mad Max character. I don't think it can really go any other way. He has to wander. But the problem is that the thematically correct ending is for them to become king and queen. But instead, the king leaves. So this is, I would say, part of our current culture, where the heroic thing to do is to place the queen. But that element does not feel correct in terms of how we work as a species. It should have been Max and Furiosa manage the Citadel as a whole, with the combined positive and masculine feminine qualities. But they don't, and that's why the ending doesn't quite work for me.
I was actually okay with the ending. I do understand why that makes sense. But yeah, maybe it's, I guess it could work several different ways. But I don't know if it would have to hit that beat that you're talking about in order to work perfectly.
It doesn't have to. Obviously, I think it's a great film. But I think that's a beat that feels like it's missing. But it's a film of our time. So the fact that it is the way it is, the fact that it was made the way it was, I don't think can be changed. It had to be that way if it's a film made today. 10 years ago.
Yes.
So here's another thing that jumped out at me. The whole focus is on having healthy children. It's the scarcest thing they have. There are clearly many children. Obviously, there are a ton of war boys. They've all got tumors. They're not going to make it very long. They might be able to reproduce. So I think the implication is the wretched. I remember looking it up. That's the term they used in the plotting. The wretched are all the people down below. They have children. And some of them become war boys. But they're disfigured by the pressure of the environment. They're not good. They can't run the thing. They can't survive long enough. The other thing that jumped out at me was there are many tough guys in Immortan Joe's service. So the guys that run the gates, some of the guys who are on the rigs are clearly like in very good physical shape.
His sons.
Right.
Or one of them.
Immortan Joe, he's wearing medals. He clearly was an adult, a warrior, in the previous world. So I'm not sure the timeline works so well, but metaphorically I think it works. He's part of the old world. He's built something in the current world. And I think all the people in really good shape, the men, I think they were children when the apocalypse happened. That's why they're full lives. But all the children born afterwards are half-lives. And so the goal, Immortan Joe's goal, is to get more full-life children post-apocalypse. And that's also a beat that doesn't quite work. Because if that's in the world, then basically that is the fundamental problem, and he was at least approaching it. It was on his mind. The redistributionist ending does not acknowledge that this is still a problem.
I do know you mean about the timeline thing, because it feels as though the world that's presented has been around for a long time, like 100 years or something, like a long time. And the reason it feels that way is because you have people who are very clearly acclimatized to that environment or don't understand any other environment, and it feels like they've never known anything else. But if the apocalypse only happened like, I don't know, 30 years ago, then you would have people who would very clearly remember the old world, and their behavior would just be completely different.
So logically it doesn't work.
No.
But symbolically it still does. He's clearly he's the decaying old system.
Yeah.
He embodies it. He's clearly falling apart. He has to rely on his sons to hold him up as he goes to show himself to the people.
Yeah.
So that symbolically it works, even if the timeline doesn't.
Yeah. I did enjoy the sort of the process of ramping up the craziness. Every 15 seconds, you're being presented with something else that's like, oh, what is this? What now? Like, what madness is going to emerge now? And it's just building up and up and up and up and up, and then you're presented with the next thing, and it's like, oh, what? There's just endless, building madness. It's just.
I read a guy's account of going to see it in the cinema when it first came out. When the camera pans around and shows the guitarist with his flamethrower guitar for the first time, a guy just stood up. He was so overcome and shouted, "Oh my God!" There's something there as well. It might on the surface be anti-patriarchy, but all the cool stuff, all the stuff you remember, comes from that patriarchal system.
This reminds me of something that maybe you have some comments on. I saw a statement by a filmmaker, and I'll have to find out who it was. But the idea was there's no such thing as an anti-war film. And the reason is you're constrained by the word film. And you're constrained by what a film must be. And what is a film? A film is entertaining. A film is
Spectacle.
Captivating. A film is thought-provoking. All of these things constrain what a film can be. And thus, a war film, presenting war on film, must necessarily be captivating. It must grab your feeling. It must be entertaining. It must be something you want to see. And thus, there's no way to present the idea of anti-war in a way on film. Because you're presenting the war as, bluntly, something cool. And there's no way to not do that as part of a film. Like, an art exhibit, sure. An anti-war art exhibit, absolutely. You can have
books.
Blood smeared on a wall or something. Like, something. You can do that easily. But a film, no. And, honestly, books, I think, suffer from the same problem. They have to be entertaining.
They do. I would posit, I read at least, there's a couple of anti-war books I can think of.
Okay.
Johnny Got His Gun and The Things They Carried.
Right. The Things They Carry is a good example.
Yeah.
And what's it called? Slaughterhouse-5. These could be good examples. Maybe, maybe you're right. Maybe book doesn't suffer from the same constraints as film.
That's because it's an examination of internal worlds. Or it can be.
Whereas a film can never be.
Yeah, it has to be external.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's visual, and thus you're presenting something outside yourself, because that's what visual means.
Speaking of visual, something that really jumped out at me on this viewing was how they're not in a weaker film. You would show people just doing the important things. So certain sci-fi films, they push the right buttons, they say the right things, the lasers work. But here, they try everything at every level. Everyone does.
Yeah.
Every character. So the war rig gets stuck in mud. They try everything they can think of.
Yeah.
They put down a plate. They try attaching it to a tree.
They lose the steering wheel. Yeah. She grabs the wrench and then puts the wrench on the steering column.
And
they build a steering wheel.
They're doing this all the time. All the characters are grabbing whatever they can, no hesitation, not even really for a second.
Yeah.
I loved the use of the bolt cutters in the movie. They just stuck around. But there's the thing, and I remember the last time they were used.
Useful.
Well, but I remember the last time that they were when they were shooting the harpoons into the back of the tank, and they had to pass them over from the front in the middle of a battle to cut them off. It strikes me. It tells you something about. Oh, this happens a lot of times where they go, take everything you can carry and run, take everything you can carry, strap it to a motorbike and go, and then you see characters act that way. Yeah. So even the war boys pick up everything they can and then they run towards something because that's what you do, because it's a wasteland. It strikes me as just a lovely piece of in-world continuity that they would never leave behind bolt cutters.
No.
Like, you would obviously know always where the bolt cutters are. Yeah. Because they're infinitely useful.
Yeah. And it actually kind of surprised me that they don't have multiple pairs of bolt cutters.
Maybe they were. Maybe. But
sounds like something you'd want regularly.
They have a lot of guns hidden in places.
Yes, that was very cool. Like the thing hidden in a clay shell on the bottom of the truck.
Of a skull.
A gun. Like, there's just a gun there. And that's wild.
So, the weird part is that at the same time that everyone is clearly optimized for survival, like they don't hesitate, they move quickly, they try everything, but simultaneously they're all clearly mentally unwell.
Yeah. And
they're not above the level of survival, they're not operating in a sane manner. No. So even the people in charge, I guess the sanest is Immortan Joe.
Yeah.
Because the bullet farmer and the gas town guy are clearly very only tenuously connected to reality.
Yeah.
I want to explore one final thing that
Yes.
you dropped earlier.
Okay.
That I think is worth digging into slightly.
Yes.
About the external necessity of a film, or the necessity for a film to be external exploration, whereas a book is internal exploration. This, I think, this was something that early filmmakers had to grapple with. They did not realize this at first. So, for example, Charlie Chaplin movies were silent, and so you had text on the screen. Obviously, that was all external, but you had to explain the circumstances. So, and then you had narrators, because, okay, what's going on? Why is it happening? How do we do omnipresent narrator in a film? I can think of early films like, Disney did a very good job doing this, have external entertainment. It's fairy tales. We all know the stories, but let's watch them in a way you've never seen them before. But also, Hitchcock made a film, I don't remember, it might be A View from a Window. I don't know if that's the name of the film. Okay. But it is a film that is done on what looks like a single shot. It is done from a window, looking at apartment blocks. And I think they're see-through. I don't know if the apartment blocks are see-through, or what you're seeing is action go with various characters through their windows, through the door, who comes in, who goes out, what the silent battles are happening in those windows. And that is, from what I can gather, completely external, but it also pulls you in.
Okay.
And that's internal exploration as well. Because it forces interpretation. What we're talking about are symbols, which I think are... Would I be wrong to say that they are internal, fundamentally? We put things in symbols so that we can look back at ourselves. That's an externalization of a symbol, but we're not doing anything but looking at ourselves.
Yeah.
That's an exploration. I do fundamentally agree that films are outward and books are more inward, as a rule.
Symbols don't exist, and yet we treat them as more important in many times than the actual physical world.
Yeah.
It's a strange outcome. Because other species don't do this.
Values don't exist.
Yeah.
And yet.
It's a difficult fictional universe to forget because it's so stark and it is set in opposition to our current lives. So it's not a film where the worry is about the apocalypse happening. The apocalypse has been and gone. now people live in the results. In the West, at least for now, or for our lives, it has been remarkably difficult to starve. You can have a very bad time, no argument. But I've read accounts from England in the 1600s, and people starved. People would be found dead by the roadside who just hadn't had food. And that's not an experience we've had.
So the first 10 minutes of Mad Max Fury Road, roughly, it felt like 10 minutes, were a bombastic display of a feudal system.
Yeah.
And a tyrannical feudal system. Maybe not what we describe as a healthy one.
I think this is missed in a lot of commentary. The tyrannical, unpleasant, unfair, flawed feudal system at the beginning is the only functioning ecology as far as anyone can see.
Yeah.
It's the only one.
Yeah.
And it's clearly been set up, like conceived, by the tyrant. The tyrant is the only source of food and organization in the whole world.
I was struck the director and the filmmakers decided to show greenery, food production, and clean water. Yeah. They didn't shy from that because they could have, and they do this in other movies. They show what do they call it, the wretched? Yeah. Show the wretched, and they show the tyrant living in luxury. Didn't show him particularly living in luxury. They showed him living in power, but and control, but not luxury. But they actually showed there's greenery, there's fresh water, and there's food, and there's a system here.
It's the only place in the whole film you see this.
As you say, it's being presented. Look at all these positive things that come from this tyrant. The question is, and the question in our society often is are there values that we care more about than remaining alive? And the answer, kind of weirdly, is yes. There are values we care more about than continuing. Yes. And honestly, that's pretty sobering to think about, because I think that's pretty common for people. But there's sort of a sense, I guess, that kind of thinking should be impossible. What could be a greater value than continuing to live? And I think presenting that and grappling with that is something we do quite a lot, or that's presented to us quite a lot.